So I get asked this question all the time. What's the best way to start off as a real estate photographer? Should I blend multiple frames or try and get everything in a single shot, get it all in the camera? So getting everything in a single frame is more of an outdated way of the past that may have been okay 10 or 15 years ago, but we're going to discuss some of the reasons why I believe that and why I think just in general things are moving toward a compositing based approach. So reason number one to stay away from getting it all in camera or the single frame approach is just that you're robbing yourself of so many potential problem solving opportunities. You're robbing yourself of the most efficient way to solve problems on site. And this is extremely important for beginners, right? Because beginners need these ways to solve the problems. So when they don't have those ways to solve the problems, it becomes very problematic. So one example of this is when you're a beginner, you have hotspots or reflections from your flashes. They might be in windows or mirrors or wherever it might happen to be. As a beginner, it's really difficult to kind of get rid of those sometimes. You're having to move your light stand around. But as a compositing photographer, you're just able to get rid of that so easily by simply getting an ambient frame or maybe moving your light into a different location. So if you can imagine this situation, if you're a beginner and you're kind of sitting there trying to get rid of a reflection and your client is standing right behind you and the homeowner is standing right behind you, there's a lot of pressure on you. You simply can't move that light anywhere to get it, that reflection disappear in a single frame. But as a compositing photographer, you'll have so many more options to get rid of that reflection. It'll be easier, and not only that, you have the options available. If you're trying to get everything in the camera, that's a real problem because you don't have access to the problem-solving abilities. So for example, you might be limited to only 10% of the solutions that you could possibly have as a single frame photographer. But when you're a compositing photographer, it opens you up to the rest of that 90%. And that's so important as a beginner. Some of the other problem-solving techniques you're sort of robbing yourself of as a single frame photographer is cloning, right? The way I really clone most of the time, especially if you can move the object in the field, is I take two frames and I stack one on top of the other, and then I can just quote-unquote clone the object out. I'm just simply brushing it away. But as a single frame photographer, all your results are baked into that one photo and you're having to actually get in there with the clone stamp and clone it out, which is not only slower, but it's less accurate, right? So the second reason we're gonna wanna stay away from single frame photography, especially as we're beginning, is because you're actually losing control. So an example of losing control with a single frame approach is when you have a window view and then in the room there are lights like a chandelier or some light bulbs. As a single frame photographer, you cannot control those independently of one another. So you're gonna have to, the results are just gonna be baked in. Whatever is there, that's gonna be what's there in your photograph. For example, if the window is 2 stops brighter than the lights within the room, that's gonna be the way it is in your photo. The lights are gonna stay the same relative to one another. But if you're a compositing photographer, you can actually control the light independently of each other. So you can control the chandelier and then you can control the window independently. So one of the misconceptions about compositing is that you're going slower. So this is actually another point in favor of compositing as well, in my opinion. So you're able to finish up quicker on site with a compositing approach because you're not having to move around all the light stand. Like take myself for an example, I just have one light with me and I don't have any equipment to set up. I can pretty much zoom through the house, and then when I get home, it takes a little bit longer to piece things together in post. But as the months go on, you're gonna get so good at this that it's overall a faster process. Either that or about the same time. So the fifth reason to ditch single frame photography and really get in there and be a compositing photographer is you're losing creative lighting options, okay? So as a single frame photographer, you're just restricted to putting lights in really restrictive locations, okay? As a compositing based photographer, the sky's the limit. You can put lights wherever you want. You can get light over here, get light over there. It's really, really a freeing way to do things. You're freed up to just light things any way you want. If you want a little dash of light over here, you can do that. It's so much more difficult, restrictive, and even time consuming being a single frame photographer. So you're just opening yourself up to all those great creative options. And the last reason I'll touch on why you should really be thinking about being a compositing photographer is it's just a way of the future. And one way I have to express this, if you look at Larry Lorman's blog, he actually has a quote answering a question I asked him, and his quote was that upwards of 90% of the photography of the month photographs have been composited photographs, okay? So almost 100, he said 95 to 100%, whatever his quote was, really high. All the top end work right now is being done by compositing photographers, okay? So it's obvious that this is where the things are going, where the top end shooters are moving to. And it's for the reasons we've discussed. So you're really only as good as what you're being taught in photography. And if you're being taught techniques that are very confining and don't give you as many creative options and are even slower, you're going to be at a real disadvantage relative to your competitors. Because what are your competitors going to be doing relative to you? Well, they're going to be moving faster on site, and they're going to be providing a better product where they have more control over the final outcome. And you also have to keep in mind, a lot of people stick with what they know. So for example, there's a lot of HDR shooters and they just stick with HDR, right? They can't get out of that rut. So they just cannot get out of that. So that's what I don't want for you. I don't want you to have this, start off with this single frame, get it all in camera approach and get stuck, okay? That's what I think happens to people. And I don't think that's a good situation to put yourself in. Just start off with a compositing based approach. It's not that hard to learn. It'll take you 10 or 15 minutes to learn the basics about layer masks and layering in Photoshop. That's really all it is. Yeah, it's gonna take you a little time to learn it and refine the technique, but it's really, really simple what you need to do within Photoshop.
Close your eyes, only God